if reform come in on this kind of propaganda, I will leave this country.
Breaking today, former Loose Women's star and ex-Muslim Saira Khan has threatened to quit the UK if Nigel Farage wins the next election with reform. So I wonder if there's going to be a whole load of people celebrating, actually. I wonder if, not because of Saira specifically, but if a whole load of lefties maybe throw Yasmin Al-Brown into the mix. If actually there'll be a whole load of support growing for Reform UK as a result of this, almost like the same phenomenon where Trump was elected in the UK and Americans managed to send over Rosie O'Donnell and Ellen DeGeneres to these parts. So this is what, well, actually, we'll get analysis from Ben Habib and Alex Phillips in just one moment on the Superstar panel, but this is what Saira Khan said on the Jeremy Vine show.
You can win an election just on culture wars. Trump has just done that. So let's see.
Yeah, but it doesn't last. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. You'll get people moving out of the country. If reform come in on this kind of propaganda, I will leave this country.
Where will you go?
I'll go to Portugal. I'll go anywhere. It's better than living here.
Alex Phillips' famous last words. What do you make of the fact that these lefty celebrities have just not learned that that type of rhetoric just doesn't work? It didn't work in the US for Trump, and the vast majority of them did not quit.
Well, the latest fad, isn't it, to say I don't like who's the prime minister, so I'm going to leave. I don't like the president, so I'm going to leave. I mean, it's as if the whole country's going, wow, we better not vote reform now because she's going to leave the country. I mean, it sort of suggests a very sort of inflated regard of somebody's own significance in the sort of prism of an entire nation. But it's just stupid, isn't it? It's just banal. It's ridiculous. But what is interesting is how many people have left the country because of Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, that's actually a real fact. You've got an exodus of millionaires and successful people and business people who actually have packed their bags and gone as a direct result of government policy. I mean, what could be an interesting turn up for events is if reform does form the next government, and if there are people who are concerned that they're actually going to grab the nettle and start dealing with some of these issues of integration, then you might suddenly find willing departures from people who never intended to make a life in Britain as a Brit, who wanted to live in a force-fielded enclave of their own monoculture, who don't like British values. Perhaps they might say, actually, we're not going to get away with it anymore, and they will leave, and that might be something that people celebrate. But this is just, ridiculous tokenist rhetoric, which, to be honest, it shines a light on the sort of person she is if she thinks that people are going to be up in arms about her saying, if reform forms the next government, I'm going to Portugal. What does she know about Portugal? Portuguese politics. Huh? Because what you might find is this wave of populism has very much deluged most of the continent of Europe.
Well, indeed, that's the thing. I mean, it's hardly like you're going to escape extreme Islam, is it, in Europe? I think what is quite sad for me about this, Ben Habib, is that actually I always thought Saira Khan was one of those reasonable lefties because she was pretty brave in terms of admitting why she had moved away from her Muslim faith, for example, because she didn't like their treatment of women, and she didn't like the fact that they were not supportive, that she was in a relationship with a white man. She went public about that. She faced a lot of pushback from extreme Islamists. But then when I hear her say something like that, I'm like, oh, you're just being as extreme as anyone else. Because, I mean, actually, if there's one thing that we've spoken about most on this show, it's that Farage is certainly not extreme these days on anything.
I mean, what struck me out of all of that was Jeremy Vine saying that Trump won the election in the US on the culture wars. And this has struck me as particularly peculiar with the British establishment and indeed Western governments across the West, is that they regard the culture wars as something that is unimportant, a distraction, the thing of adolescent politics. In fact, the culture of a nation is fundamental to its ability to be economically prosperous, for it to go forward in a coherent way, its preparedness to defend itself, its ability to be confident within itself, and so many other things. Culture is a critical component. A homogeneous, settled culture is a critical component of nationhood, of the ability of a country to go forward in any shape or form. And politicians should actually recognize, in my view, that the economy should serve three things. It should serve the constitution of a country, the culture of a country, and the people of a country. And of course, they're all intertwined. And the economics must never rise above and trump culture. And I think one of the reasons we've got into the pickle we've got into in this country is that we've always put the economy up at the top of our priorities. And for example, we locked up people during COVID and printed 500 billion. And we thought that the 500 billion that we would print would somehow economically remove the pain of what we were doing. But actually, we did the opposite of what our forefathers did in World War II, for example, where they would have given up their lives to protect their civil liberty because they recognized the importance of protecting the nation state and the culture of the United Kingdom. You've actually got to fight tooth and nail to protect your country, which basically means fighting for the protection of your culture. And so these people who dismiss the importance of culture and say, well, it's just the culture wars, we should focus on the more important economic aspects of the governance, are completely missing the point. Culture is right up there as critically important. And if Reform does form a government, I very much hope it understands the critical importance of culture and that it protects, promotes, and celebrates British culture, that we're no longer challenged to define what it means to be British and left wanting for an answer because we're reduced to ridiculous things like the European Convention of Human Rights to describe what we mean by people having values in this country. But there's got to be a determined effort by the next government actually to put culture front and center. And if someone like Saira Khan doesn't like an integrated, settled, pro-British, pro-traditional British culture, then of course she's welcome to leave the country.
Indeed. And unfortunately, at the moment, it does feel like it's people in America who are really raising the attention of what's going on in this issue when it comes to the Islam takeover of the UK. Radio Genoa over the weekend posted, in London, there are so many Muslims that they are forced to pray even on payments. This is what an Islamic invasion looks like. Charlie Kirk responded saying there are 50 Muslim countries in the world, 50 Muslim majority countries. Ask yourself why they insist on immigrating to the Christian West. And Maya Tusi replied, because Islam as an ideology is about taking over the world. They failed to succeed using force. Now there is a new approach. Alex Phillips, what do you make of the fact that it seems to be people like Charlie Kirk who are prepared to say what most people in the UK, in the British elite class, are not, which is basically that Islam is not compatible with our Christian way of life? But first, being sleep deprived makes you perform as poorly as someone legally drunk. These deficits include slowed reaction time, reduced working memory, impaired decision-making, and poor emotional regulation. Poor sleep is also a stronger predictor of early death as smoking. In fact, people with highly irregular sleep patterns face mortality risks on par with heavy smokers. Desperate to fix this, most people turn to melatonin. But here's the problem. Melatonin is not a hormone, not a vitamin, and most supplements give you doses 10 to 50 times higher than your body would ever naturally produce. It's actually a prescription drug in many countries. These super physiological doses throw off your body's natural rhythm, affect your body's ability to produce melatonin naturally, and lead to side effects like morning grogginess and hormone disruption. Worst of all, melatonin isn't even regulated. Independent lab tests found that actual melatonin content in melatonin products can vary by up to 464%. So basically what this means is you don't know what you're getting. This is why I use Evening Being by Verso. It's melatonin-free, using a blend of clinically studied, patented ingredients shown in multiple human studies to calm an active mind, help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and improve deep and REM sleep without messing with your hormones or leaving you groggy the next day. After taking evening bean for a whole long time, I have to say I fall asleep faster. I feel sharper the next day. It's so good. And actually, one of their customers left a review, this is how good it is, saying they were able to get off Ambien, which is a heavy sleep pharmaceutical drug. So click the link in the show description or head on over to evening.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code outspoken at checkout to save 15% on your first order. Try evening bean tonight, wake up feeling refreshed tomorrow. That's evening, the word evening, .ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code outspoken to save 15%. But now, back to the show.
Yeah, because they still have free speech in America, right? It's that simple. They've been brought up having the ability to express such views without fear of persecution. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way in this country. And it doesn't work that way politically because the media is so hardened to actually generating these taboo subjects, to beatifying certain individuals and causes and demonizing others. And then at the same time, when you look at the way that we run our politics with first past the post, but also on a multi-party system, that demonization of the media can be a hugely compressing factor on electoral success. So we end up stuck in this awful game where we don't agree with the rules, but we're forced to play it if we want to stand any chance of winning. And so America doesn't have so much of an issue. I was speaking to a friend just now before coming on your show, and we were saying, but, you know, Trump was really bold and radical and said all of these things, and, you know, he still got elected. Why can't Nigel do the same? And I said, because the choice was between Joe Biden, or not Joe Biden, actually it's Kamala Harris at that point, who, you know, Joe Biden, the fossil, someone who's decrepit and barely functioning, and a woman who just seemed outright balmy and like DEI on steroids, versus Donald Trump. There weren't other sort of entities particularly that you could pick. So you either sat it out or backed your horse. Now, in the United Kingdom, where you have, largely speaking now, three parties, you've got Labour Party Reform and the Conservatives, or the Conservatives are dying a death. But actually, it goes beyond that. You've got the SNP, Plaid Cymru, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens. You have a multi-party system, but in order to win under first past the post, you've still got to try and push up to the magic 30%. Unfortunately, you find yourself entangled within a political strategy that is dictated by this ridiculous straitjacket of media censoriousness, a cultural taboo that's been drummed into us for so many decades now that we've forgotten what freedom of speech is. It's a sad and woeful situation. And I wish it didn't have to be this way. I wish we could have leadership that came out and said exactly what they think, because I'm pretty certain that applies as well to the Conservative Party. There have been many members of the Conservative Party who 10 years ago wouldn't have said boo to a goose, but now they've seen that window shift, are happy to turn around and voice their opinions on certain topics that 5 years ago would have been unconscionable. But that's because we are forced into a system where politicians are made to be weak, and where journalists end up being public prosecutors. And quite frankly, it's a tragedy, because Britain always used to be the lead nation of philosophy and innovation and free thinking and being a vanguard on so much progress in the world.
I know, it is. It is really disturbing. Ben Habib, just before you come in, I wanted to show you a little bit of an interview that Rupert Lowe has conducted with our friend Connor Tomlinson on Tomlinson Talks. Connor will actually be here tomorrow, by the way, talking about this in a bit more detail. But he talks about this issue. Watch.
I don't understand why our establishment is so keen to protect Islam. I mean, it's one of many religions, and I don't think any religion should be singled out for any special treatment. If you have a society that believes in free speech and that does poke fun at things and does challenge things and does debate whether something's right or wrong, there should be no exceptions. It should be for every religion, every faith, every politician, every public servant, whoever. They should all be, and they should all face the same challenge from a society which ultimately is seeking the truth. And you don't get at the truth by suppressing free speech. You don't get at the truth by bullying people into silence. I think we've seen that throughout history.
Ben Habib, do you agree with Rupert there?
Well, it comes back again to mass migration coupled with regulatory and legal framework which favors minority ethnic and minority religious beliefs in the United Kingdom. And when you create that framework and the majority of those who fall in the protected status of minorities, in our case in this country, Muslims, 3.9 million in 2021. I think the figure's probably markedly higher than that now. What effectively happens is that within that protected status, it is the Muslims who are protected, and none of the others, by definition, then get protection from the Muslim contingent, as it were. And so it is Islam in this country that is on the ascendancy, in significant part because of mass migration, but again, because of this regulatory framework that we've created that protects and promotes it. And the biggest challenge Islam has, particularly the form of Islam that has gone across the world since the 1980s, is this sort of fundamental belief, which is central to Islam, that the Quran is the word of God and is unchallengeable. And the minute you accept that as a Muslim, you can't tolerate a debate about the ideology because it's God that wrote the book. And if God wrote the book, it's perfect. And if it's perfect, it is beyond challenge. And so freedom of speech is very, very difficult in Islam, at least as far as the ideology is concerned. And that makes Islam as an ideology challenging for the form of democracy, at least that we have in this country. And so we're going to find increasingly that if we have a regulatory framework that protects and promotes Islam, and that ideology isn't comfortable with the debate about itself in the way that Christianity is, because the word of God is the Quran, then we're going to have greater and greater difficulties in settling our society. And this comes full circle, again, Dan, back to what I was saying about the importance of culture. Rupert said something with which I slightly disagree. He said all religions should be treated the same in this country. We should, of course, have freedom of religion, but there is one religion which we do need to put over and above every other religion, and we need to make the case for it, and it needs to be constitutionally central, and the head of the state needs to understand what his role is when it comes to that religion. And everyone must by now know I'm talking about Christianity. We are essentially a Christian nation, and that Christian culture, that Christian heritage, the Christian belief, the promotion of church. I wish Justin Welby understood what it was, and his successor understands what it is. But Christianity we must be much more muscular about our Christian beliefs now in order to right the imbalance that we've now got in the United Kingdom. Christianity now needs to be much more confident, much more proselytizing, much more on its front foot than it's been for the last couple of 100 years.
Very well put indeed. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go wherever you are.